Welcome to Free Thought Matters. I'm Annie Laurie Gaylor.
And I'm Dan Barker. Annie Laurie and I are co-presidents of the Freedom from Religion Foundation, which produces this weekly TV program to ensure that there's a secular voice on our airwaves, especially on Sunday mornings, which is when this show usually airs.
The Freedom from Religion Foundation serves as a national association of freethinkers, atheists, agnostics, and other non-believers, and works diligently to uphold the constitutional principle of separation between state and church.
And we invite you to join us. Become a member in our work so that reason and our God-free Constitution will prevail. We'd be delighted to share a complimentary copy of our newspaper, Free Thought Today, and other information about FFRF's 41 years of achievements. Just ask at ffrf.org or phone 1-800-335-4021.
And today our guest is Robyn Blumner. She's now CEO of the Center for Inquiry and Executive Director of the Richard Dawkins Foundation for Reason and Science. Robyn is an attorney who directed state branches of the ACLU in Utah and Florida, then became a prominent newspaper columnist for 16 years. Her column, I'm an Atheist, So What?, which ran in the St. Petersburg Times in 2004, prompted us at FFRF to give her our Emperor Has No Clothes Award, reserved for public figures making known their dissent from religion. So thank you for joining us, Robyn.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
So that's when we first heard about you, was that column you wrote in 2004 in Florida, I'm an Atheist, so what? So why? What prompted you to write a column like that?
Well, I wrote it because no one else would, basically. There was a city council meeting in which an atheist was invited to give the invocation, and it caused an incredible hoopla at the time, with city council members storming out of the room rather than listen to an atheist give a talk. An invocation that was, of course, wonderfully benign and promoting church-state separation and the commonality of all humanity, but that was too much for at least a couple of city council members. And I was really exercised over this. I hadn't really talked about my atheism in print before.
You were in journalism at that time?
I was a columnist and editorial writer for the St. Petersburg Times newspaper, and I was nationally syndicated. So my column was picked up by newspapers around the country, and Tribune Media Services, which is a syndicate out of Chicago, was my agent. The editorial board did not seem interested in writing an editorial condemning the actions of these city council members, and I felt like if it was any other marginalized group in society, the paper would have stepped forward. So I felt it was my duty, not only as a good opinion writer, but as an atheist myself, promoting my own vantage point, to write this. So I really actually didn't think much of it when I was writing it. I didn't think I was taking a step into the abyss or that I was doing something groundbreaking. It turned out that it was. The column came out to my sense of just wonderful kismet about a week ahead of Sam Harris's book, The End of Faith, which really launched the new atheist movement. And it took the city council to task for its rude treatment of the atheist who came before it to give a proper invocation. And it also announced sort of my worldview, in which I rejected the supernatural. I rejected the idea of ghosts and goblins and gods and saints and angels and all of those pseudoscientific ideas. And I wondered aloud why that would make me an anathema to the people on the city council. And in fact, a couple of those who left the room were African American and Hispanic. And I thought, if anyone would understand how it felt to be a minority who needed to have some kind of an outreach and understanding, it should have been them. But instead they treated atheism as if it was a disease. And in fact, one city council member suggested that listening to an atheist give an invocation was the equivalent of having unprotected sex.
Well, Dan knows how you felt that indignation because last spring, of course, District of Columbia Appeals Court said he doesn't have a prayer, he couldn't give a secular invocation at Congress. So it's not just at that city council way back when in 2004, it's really in Washington, D.C., where the House of Representatives is not representative.
And there's a jab at all of us non-religious Americans, which is the fastest growing religious identity in the country right now.
Of course it is. And as you well know, the entire secular community stepped up to promote your cause and to file amicus briefs on your behalf.
CFI did.
CFI did, and other secular groups did. We all had a dog in that fight, and we all
a barker dog.
A barker call, very good, and we all suffered that loss.
Yes,
as a community.
A supreme insult to turning all of us into second-class citizens, and not only that, but saying we're actually undesirable. You know, it's very personal. I'm so glad that you wrote that column, and that's how we found you.
And then what was really interesting to me about the column was, you know, I sent it off, it got published, and suddenly this barrage of response came in. 2004, early-ish years of the internet, I was getting emails, though, by the hundreds. I was getting paper letters. I was getting phone calls. Overwhelmingly, people were so grateful to see their point of view finally represented in a mainstream publication. People would write me and say, I've been reading newspapers loyally for 60 or 70 years. I have never before seen an atheist point of view represented.
And that's a long time to wait.
I think things are better now in general. You know, it's not such a rare act for someone to come out as an atheist, but look, still in parts of the country, it's incredibly dangerous. I had somebody, at least more than one person actually, come up to me and say, if you lose your job because of this column, we have a job for you.
Wow.
It may not have been a job in law or opinion writing or the things that I was adept at, but they were like, look, we have some kind of an economic safety net for you.
But then you did
it.
find a job in the secular community eventually, so that's a good ending to that story.
Yeah, 10 years later, in fact. In 2014, I started with the Richard Dawkins Foundation for Reason and Science. I had watched the newspaper industry start to erode and shrink. It was so disheartening. I mean, it's one thing when Ivory soap goes off the shelf, you know, you buy a different kind of soap. It's another thing when the nation's newspapers go away. There simply isn't that kind of check on government power that print newspapers provide. So with a very sad heart, I watched the newspaper industry slowly go away, and I decided that it was time for me to get back into progressive advocacy and nonprofits because I had been with the ACLU for so long. I'd also been an atheist since the time I was 11 or 12. Richard Dawkins was a hero of mine. I'd read multiple books of his, not just The God Delusion, which of course was brilliant. And I know that you wrote a book off of an element of The God Delusion.
A sentence in that book became another book.
Right.
Yeah.
At his urging.
Yes, and it was a fantastic book. But also his evolutionary biology work, which makes those complicated scientific concepts accessible to lay people. So I was very happy to get the nod from Richard and the foundation to take that over. Because
he's not just an atheist who has a point of view. He has established himself as a reputation in the sciences and the selfish gene, and he's done his homework and, you know, earned his fame already. And then it comes out on top of that, he's an outspoken atheist.
Well, he used his celebrity to to put the movement forward.
Yeah, you think about what Richard has sacrificed in a sense. His science books are some of the best read in the world. He's his Oxford pedigree has put him at the pinnacle of his profession. And then he decides to antagonize 80% of humanity by coming out very strongly for atheism and then being a vocal critic of organized religion. And that has caused him a lot of angst in his life, but it also has made him a hero beyond what his science would have established.
Just no question. I mean, the movement wouldn't be where it is today if it weren't for Richard Dawkins, and he's been so very generous with his time and resources and so on. So.
And can I just clarify for people who think that he's as angry as his angriest tweet? And you know this because you know him well. He is a darling man.
He is. He's charming, and shy, and mild-mannered.
He's got a generous soul, and he's a feminist. So anyone who thinks that Richard is some kind of old-timey misogynist has him completely wrong.
Yes, I agree. Well, so then soon after you joined or became CEO of the Dawkins Foundation, then there was a merger. Yeah,
so we merged at the behest of the Center for Inquiry. The Richard Dawkins Foundation was approached by CFI. This was, of course, before I was asked to be the CEO of the organization. There was a long set of discussions and negotiations between the Richard Dawkins Foundation and CFI, but our missions were so perfectly aligned. The promotion of reason and science. You know, the Richard Dawkins Foundation always had that science piece, that skepticism piece, along with the atheism, secular humanism piece, and that is exactly the mission of the Center for Inquiry. So you had this sort of the scrappy organization, the Richard Dawkins Foundation, with a celebrity at the helm, and then you had the legacy organization, CFI, that had been around for 40 years.
So we're going to take a break right now, Robyn. We're going to come back and talk more about Center for Inquiry, secular rescue, which is very dear to both of our hearts, and skepticism and science, and what's going on there with Center for Inquiry. I'm Annie Laurie Gaylord.
I'm Dan Barker. Stay tuned for more Free Thought Matters.
Hi, I'm Ron Reagan, an unabashed atheist, and I'm alarmed by the intrusions of religion into our secular government. That's why I'm asking you to support the Freedom from Religion Foundation, the nation's largest and most effective association of atheists and agnostics, working to keep state and church separate, just like our founding fathers intended. Please support the Freedom from Religion Foundation. Ron Reagan, lifelong atheist, not afraid of burning in hell.
I can honestly say that I don't remember ever believing in a God. I grew up on the standard American angels and bedtime prayers and stories of Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny. Believing in magical beings who bring sweets and treasures was fun when I was 4. I've never really struggled with the question of my personal religion or lack thereof. Not that I didn't ponder the question of God, but it didn't seem reasonable to go through the mental contortions necessary to buy into the stories, let alone learn and follow the arbitrary and objectively discriminatory rules of any organized religion. I find religion unnecessary and generally a waste of time at best. Most often, religion is the excuse for the worst human behavior possible. The damage wrought by belief in myths is written throughout human history, and the toll it continues to take on individuals and society as a whole is clear and present today. There are moments in history where people are defined by whether or not they go along to get along, or whether they stand up and resist. Now is one of those times. I know that I'm not alone in rejecting fairy tales, but I know a lot of people find embracing the tag of atheist unsettling. Maybe agnostic is a term with less baggage, and frankly, I'm comfortable with either. They both describe people who embrace reason and reject magical thinking. But now is not a time to split hairs over definitions. We face ever more aggressive efforts of religious zealots to claw their way into places of influence, our secular schools, our bedrooms, and even our bodies. Reasonable people are obligated to engage them, or we risk being drowned out by the fundamentalists who insist, due to their theological obsession, that only they know what's best for all of us. We can't allow their ideological crusade to strip us of our constitutional rights or reverse the social progress that so many have fought and died for. My name is Christina DeLayden, and I'm an out-of-the-closet atheist.
And welcome back to Free Thought Matters. We're continuing our conversation with Robyn Blumner, the Executive Director of Center for Inquiry, which just merged with the Richard Dawkins Foundation for Reason and Science. And you were telling us about the emphasis on skepticism that CFI brings to the table in our big movement.
Right. Well, there are wonderful organizations throughout the secular community. The one thing that really differentiates CFI is that we have a focus on pseudoscience and combating it wherever it arises. So what is pseudoscience? Pseudoscience is things like psychic power, the idea that there's alien abduction, alternative medicine, anything where someone has a belief system without evidence, without rational thinking. You know, it's the supernatural writ large.
So not necessarily religion, but religion could be a part of that.
It definitely could be a part of that, you know, the belief in angels existing or ghosts, heaven and hell. That's all part of pseudoscience. We like to put it under a big category of woo.
Woo.
You know, and woo afflicts the political right and the political left. You know, as we know, the anti-vaccination movement both has the religious cohorts who claim it's a violation of, you know, their religious leanings, who think that that only God should protect their children, which is why their children die when they're sick, and this bizarre left-wing group that thinks big pharma is out to afflict their children with autism. It's really this bizarre amalgamation. And we know that there's absolutely no science that backs up the claim that vaccines are dangerous. In fact, vaccines are one of the greatest human health advances ever created. And so the Center for Inquiry goes and testifies where vaccine exemptions are under consideration, either to expand or contract. We are looking for states to contract these exemptions from having kids get vaccinations. But our biggest case in this pseudoscience space has to do with our challenge to the CVS pharmacy chain and the way that they market homeopathic products. So even people who are really well versed in science and medicine do not know what homeopathy is. Homeopathy is water. That is all it is. It's this idea that if you take an active ingredient and you dilute it so many times so that not a single molecule of that ingredient remains, that is a powerful elixir to respond to disease. It's ridiculous.
Maybe it's a perversion or a misunderstanding of how inoculations work.
Yeah, it could be
because
that.
we give people a little bit of something in order to prevent them from getting the flu.
And it sounds scientific, homeopathy, you know, and it's in the stores.
And it's in the stores. And it's produced in boxes that make it look like real medicine. You'll see a product that's called Asthma Care, and on the label it says safe, natural, smart, and it's homeopathy. It's homeopathy for asthma, which is completely worthless. This is not medicine. It will not respond to asthma symptoms. But can you imagine a parent going to a pharmacy, seeing this that says safe, natural, smart on the label?
Well, it is safe. I mean, water is safe.
It's perfectly safe, and it is very natural.
But it won't be effective.
It's not smart, though. And so parents are bamboozled by it. Adults are bamboozled by it. This is a $3 billion a year industry. And so what CFI has done is sued CVS for basically the way it markets homeopathic products. They put right alongside evidence-based, science-based medicine.
So let's also talk about another program that CFI has, and we work with you at the Freedom from Religion Foundation on this. And your name for it, Secular Rescue. And we've sort of been calling it the Secular Underground Railroad, but it's the same thing. Tell us how you got involved in that and what it is.
Secular Rescue is, I think, one of our most important programs, and we're just so grateful to FFRF for cooperating with us and working with that program and
back to you.
Donating.
It's been great working with CFI on it.
Donating to the program. So this started really as a result of the mass slaughter that was happening in Bangladesh in 2013 and then 2014, where atheist writers, secular bloggers, and activists in that country were targeted for slaughter, for murder on the streets.
With machetes.
With machetes, or however, whatever implement was available. And some of our friends were killed in this manner. People who wrote for the Free Inquiry magazine, people who we had direct personal relationships with, and it was heartbreaking and very, very scary. And so we decided we had to provide an escape route for these people, which included generating funds to provide them with access to visas, some money to live when they got to a new country, and creating a support network to help them flee. So that's how it started. It started in 2015. And since then, we've helped, last year it was 50 people. Now, not all of them we helped to leave a country. Some of them we helped to stay safe in place.
Or once they've gone out, once there's someplace. The problem often is when they're seeking asylum and they can't work.
Right.
And they can't do anything, so how do they support themselves and often their families?
Right. So we provide money, you guys have provided money to help people survive in these safe places. Getting them lawyers for their asylum hearings, providing letters of support, all those are the things that the Secular Rescue Program does. Bangladesh, Pakistan, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, all of these are the kinds of countries that we're helping people escape from.
And maybe India coming up. We don't know what will happen there.
So plane tickets too, and train tickets and that.
Plane tickets.
Yeah.
We help them with the money for visas. You typically have to get them themselves, but sometimes we can arrange to have a conference where they're invited so that there's an excuse for them to get a visa to a country. Yeah. One of the most challenging parts of the program is that they all want to come to a Western democracy, completely understandable, but it's a lot harder to get into Canada, Germany, the UK than it is to just go to Nepal or just take a trip across the border, even to India.
Yeah. And certainly it's terribly hard to get into the United States.
It's very hard.
It's just almost impossible. A few have made it, and something we need to work on with the State Department.
And we have connections within the State Department who actually feel an affiliation to these causes, and they'd like to be able to do more.
And have called on us to help at least one person that they brought in. And
right.
Both CFI and FFRF helped a woman from Iraq.
We did.
At the request of the State Department. So
and
they
we're
are
still working for her asylum at this point. We found an attorney for her, and hopefully she'll have asylum soon.
Hopefully she will.
So atheists can actually be charitable and giving and kind and helping others?
Imagine that.
You work with women's rights as well at CFI?
We do. So if you think about any public policy that emanates out of religious dogma, we're usually involved with it, which is why we'd be on the side of abortion rights, contraception rights, same-sex marriage rights, because we know the opposition
is organized religion. And,
exactly.
And the rationale for it is the Bible.
Right.
Or other religious dogma.
Right. And what we're seeing now is that the courts are becoming hostile to claims, to our claims of church-state separation, but they're becoming much friendlier to the idea of religious freedom, including religious privilege, and the license to discriminate against gays and lesbians.
They're rebranding that phrase, religious freedom, really.
They are.
Freedom to... persecute.
And of course, the Trump administration's judicial picks are primed.
Disastrous.
Yeah, they're primed to make that a cause célèbre.
So, Robyn, we just have about a minute left. Put in a little pitch for humanism. Why should someone be a humanist?
Because it's absolutely the best means to promote human progress and human rights for the broadest possible population. Yeah, I don't know if you've read Steven Pinker's book, Enlightenment
yes.
Now.
Yes. He's an honorary director of FFRF.
Yes, he is.
Well, and he was on this show about that, so.
Yeah.
And I urge everyone to read this book because it is a 500-page advertisement for how human progress is served by humanist values.
And how humanist values, free thinkers, rebels brought about the Enlightenment. And
Absolutely.
the Enlightenment, of course, is constantly in danger. So we need to keep those lights lit. And thank you for your help in doing that, Robyn.
And thank you both. You both have been heroes in this movement.
So even though times are dark, it's groups like yours and others that are giving us hope, giving us a meaning in life to make this a better world. Thank you, Robyn.
Well, thank you, Robyn, so much for joining us on Free Thought Matters. And thank you for watching Free Thought Matters.
Because free thought matters.
Hi, I'm Steve Pinker. In my book, Enlightenment Now, I show that the world has become a better place as reason has been overcoming superstition and tribalism. But the values of the Enlightenment are under attack. That's why I'm a proud member of the Freedom from Religion Foundation, the nation's largest association of free thinkers working to keep state and church separate. Please join me in supporting the Freedom from Religion Foundation to ensure that our government is driven not by religion, but by reason.